I call this meeting of Township High School District 211 Board of Education to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Dombrowski.
Here.
Mr. Hinshaw.
Here.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Here.
Mr. Lefevre.
Here.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mrs. Burke.
Here. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening and welcome. We'll begin tonight's meeting with recognitions. Dr. Cates.
We're very pleased tonight to have a highlight each year of introducing our newly appointed administrators and deans, and we are very fortunate to have this talented crew with us here tonight. I ask you to stand up and to be acknowledged as I read a summary of information about you. I'm going to start with Mr. Tony Medina. Mr. Tony Medina has been appointed as the 12-month assistant principal at Palatine High School. Previous to this role, he had been a 10-month assistant principal at Palatine High School since 2015. Prior to his administrative appointment, Mr. Medina served as a world language teacher at Fremd High School beginning in 2006, and he later became department chair of world language in 2013. While a teacher and chair, Mr. Medina participated in key building initiatives and served as a football and lacrosse coach. Mr. Medina received his undergraduate degree in business administration and Spanish from Benedictine University in 2004. In 2012, he received a master's degree in Spanish from Northeastern University. Mr. Medina completed a second master's degree in 2014 in the Illinois Principal Preparation Program at Concordia University. Welcome, Tony. Mary Kate Smith. Ms. Mary Kate Smith begins her tenure as a 10-month assistant principal at Palatine High School this school year. Previously, she was a special education teacher at Hoffman Estates High School since 2009. During her time as a teacher, she served as a leader within the special education department and led the educational life skills program for students with special needs. Last school year, Ms. Smith was the dean at Hoffman Estates High School, where she coordinated the school's academic intervention program and provided support in addressing student attendance and behavioral concerns. Ms. Smith received her undergraduate degree in special education from Illinois State University in 2009. She went on to earn her first master's degree in reading from St. Xavier University in 2011 and completed the coursework for her second master's degree in educational leadership from Concordia University in May 2018. Welcome, Mary Kate. Alan McAllister, Building and Grounds Manager. Mr. Alan McAllister was appointed as the Building and Grounds Manager at Palatine High School this past July. Mr. McAllister received a degree in heating, cooling, and electric in 1994. He started his career in District 211 as a Central Maintenance Force staff member in September of 1999 and maintained HVAC and electrical systems at the Administration Center. From 2006 to 2012, Mr. McAllister served as the lead maintenance person for Hoffman Estates High School, where he maintained the building's automation and mechanical systems. He returned to the Administration Center Central Maintenance Force in 2012, and in this role he continued to assist with other buildings in resolving mechanical issues while also assisting many additional projects throughout the district. In November 2017, Mr. McAllister was promoted to the night foreman position at Palatine High School and oversaw the staff and operations of the second shift maintenance and custodial services for the school. Mr. McAllister, thank you. Peter Gavin, Dean. Mr. Peter Gavin was named as the Dean for Palatine High School for this school year. Mr. Gavin started as a special education teacher at Fremd High School in 2010 and then transitioned to Palatine High School in 2013. He has been part of several school and district-wide committees, has served as girls volleyball coach, and was recently appointed as the boys head volleyball coach at Palatine High School. Mr. Gavin earned his Learning Behavior Specialist degree from Illinois State University in December of 2009 and earned a master's degree in Instructional Leadership and Principal Preparation from Roosevelt University in August 27. Peter, we're glad to have you. Scott Hagel, Dean at Palatine High School. Mr. Scott Hagel was selected to serve this year as the Dean at Palatine High School. He started as a physical education teacher at Palatine in 2000. As a Palatine High School teacher, he has filled multiple roles, including leading a very successful boys gymnastics program as a head coach and serving as the assistant girls coach. He has qualified as a nationally board-certified teacher twice and was recently inducted in the Illinois High School Gymnastics Coaches Association Hall of Fame. Mr. Hagel earned a bachelor's degree in physical education from Northern Illinois University in 2000, a master's degree in physical education from Chicago State University in 2003, and a second master's degree in instructional leadership and principal preparation from Roosevelt University in 2018. We're glad to have you, Scott. We'll move over to Fremd High School. Katie Johnson, the dean. Ms. Catherine Johnson was appointed as dean for Fremd High School for this school year. Mrs. Johnson served the Family and Consumer Science Department at Fremd in 2006. During her tenure, she has been a curriculum leader, a member of the Staff Development Steering Committee, a technology trailblazer, and a coach for varsity dance and JV flags. Additionally, she supports students through various clubs, including Service Over Self, Operation Snowball, and the Culinary Club. Mrs. Johnson earned her bachelor's degree in Family and Consumer Sciences and Secondary Education from Bradley University in 2006. She secured her first master's degree in Family and Consumer Sciences from Eastern Illinois University in 2010, and English as a second language endorsement from National Louis University in 2012, and a second master's in Instructional Leadership and Principal Preparation from Roosevelt University in 2018. Katie, we're glad to have you part of the team. James B. Conant High School, Mr. Alex Woods. Mr. Alex Woods began his position as the Building and Grounds Manager at Conant High School in January of 2018. Mr. Woods has served in multiple roles in the district's Operations and Maintenance Department since 1994. Prior to his appointment, Mr. Woods oversaw the second shift as a foreman at Schaumburg High School, a position he held since October of 2016. Mr. Woods developed experience both on the grounds and within the building while serving at Palatine High School. While there at Palatine, Alex served as a custodian from 1994 to 2003, a swingman from 2003 to 2012, and a groundsman between 2012 and 2016. And another, glad to have you, Alex. Thank you. David Moravec, Dean at Conant High School. Mr. David Moravec was selected to serve as the Dean for Conant High School for the 2018-2019 school year. Mr. Moravec has been a social studies teacher at Conant High School since 1999. During this time, Mr. Moravec has been recognized twice as a National Board Certified Teacher and has been an active leader in the iPad program, as well as numerous other curricular initiatives. Mr. Moravec also served as either a coach or an activity sponsor every year while teaching at Conant. Since 2013, Mr. Moravec has served as the head student council advisor. Mr. Moravec earned his bachelor's degree in government from Wesleyan University in 1995 and his master's degree in curriculum and instruction from Barat College in 1998. Mr. Moravec completed his coursework at National Louis University last year for his educational leadership endorsement. Thank you, Dave. Hoffman Estates High School, Ms. Jaquise Gilbert. Ms. Jaquise Gilbert was appointed as 12-month assistant principal at Hoffman Estates High School. Ms. Gilbert began her teaching career in District 211 in 1993 at Fremd High School as a physical education teacher and basketball coach. In 2001, she was promoted to 10-month assistant principal at Fremd High School, where she remained until her promotion to 12-month assistant principal at Schaumburg High School in 2004. Since 2005, Ms. Gilbert has played an important role on the leadership teams at Hoffman Estates High School and Palatine High School, and with this appointment, Ms. Gilbert returns to Hoffman Estates High School for the 2018-2019 school year. Ms. Gilbert received her bachelor's degree in physical education from the University of Illinois at Chicago, a master's degree in education from Chicago State University. Ms. Gilbert earned her administrative certificate from Loyola University. Jaquise, welcome to you, and we're glad to have you back at Hoffman. Also at Hoffman Estates, Erin Hedinger. Mrs. Erin Hedinger was named as the Dean at Hoffman Estates High School for this school year. Mrs. Hedinger has been a social studies teacher at Hoffman Estates High School since 2008. She has been an active member of the faculty, serving as a committee member in several building initiatives and as the varsity dance coach for 7 years, an assistant to student council and the sponsor for the Women's Empowerment Group. Mrs. Hedinger earned her bachelor's degree in social science and secondary education from Bradley University in 2007 and her master's degree in reading education from Concordia University in 2012. Welcome to you, Erin. The Higgins Education Center, Jessica Orsted. Ms. Jessica Orsted will serve as the program administrator for the Higgins Education Center. She began her teaching career in Des Plaines School District 62 in 2001 as a middle school teacher. After 8 years of teaching, she was appointed at Skokie School District 69 as the Dean of Students, a position she filled from 2009 until 2011. Ms. Orsted then went on to East Aurora Unit District 131, where she served in multiple roles, including Dean of Students from 2011 to 2014, Assistant Principal of Supplemental Programs and Resources from 2014 to 2016, and Assistant Principal for Student Services since 2016. Her administrative experiences in East Aurora included providing oversight and planning for students with special needs and alternative school programming. Ms. Orsted received her bachelor's degree in physical education from the University of Illinois Chicago in 1996, secured her teaching license through Trinity International University in 2001, and achieved her master's degree in educational leadership from Concordia University in 2008. Jessica, we're very glad to have you join us in District 211. Here at the Administration Center, Mr. Dave Greliak, Facilities and Energy Manager. Mr. David Greliak began his position in July as the Facilities and Energy Manager at the District 211 Administration Center. Since graduating with a bachelor's degree from Western Illinois University in 1993, Mr. Greliak has been involved in the management and improvement of District 211 facilities. From 93 until 98, Mr. Greliak worked in general maintenance and the district warehouse at the Administration Center. Between 98 and 2003, Mr. Greliak served on the district's central maintenance force, installing electrical work and networking materials for the district's network infrastructure. Mr. Greliak comes to his new position as Facilities and Energy Manager after 15 years of building leadership as Palatine High School's Building and Grounds Manager, a position he held since 2003. Over the years at Palatine High School, Mr. Greliak coordinated major construction projects, worked with mechanical and automation systems, and provided supervision and oversight of the building's custodial and maintenance staff. We're very glad to have you here at the Administration Center, Dave. This time I'd like to ask Mr. Derek Fivelson and Molly Fivelson to join us up at the front of the room. We're very glad you're here with us this evening. On Friday, August 3rd, Conant High School Mathematics Department Chair Derek Fivelson and his wife Molly took courageous actions to save a woman's life. While on their way to their son's baseball tournament in Freeport, Derek witnessed a car lose control, flip over, and land upside down, and partially submerged in a retention pond at the intersection of Route 47 and Interstate 90 near Huntley. Derek and several other witnesses ran into the murky water and worked together to extricate the woman, who was unconscious in the car and underwater for several minutes. Upon finally pulling her from the car, they carried the lifeless woman to the shore, where Molly and others took turns administering CPR. Concerned that there may be other passengers or children in the car, Derek and the others to continue to search the submerged car. Fortunately, there were no other passengers. Molly and the others who were administering CPR eventually revived the woman, and an ambulance transported the revived driver to a local hospital. Due to the quick and courageous actions of Derek and Molly Fivelson, along with several other citizens, the driver survived and is expected to make a full recovery from her injuries. Derek and Molly, on behalf of the Board of Education and District 211, we want to thank you for your exemplary actions. It is just simply outstanding, and we are just pleased to have you among us. Thank you.
Thank you. The board will now begin our business portion of the meeting. You are welcome to stay, but we certainly understand if you have other commitments. Thank you again for coming this evening. sure know how to
Hi.
clear a room. We will begin the next portion of our meeting with citizens' appearances and presentations. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the Board of Education that did not have an opportunity to sign the yellow sheet? Okay, we don't see any. We will move on to our presentation. Dr. Cates?
Board, tonight we present you with our proposed budget for 2018-2019. I'm going to wait just a moment here for Barb and Lauren to get stationed. The proposed budget we're presenting you with tonight is balanced in accordance with the school code, and expenses within the budget are aligned with achieving district academic goals. The budget is planned and designed to maintain a minimum of 33.3% fund balance within our educational fund and our combined operating funds. The revenues in the budget are based on a levy increase within the limitations of the tax cap set by a consumer price index of 2.1% that you approved last December. The budget is consistent with the board's commitment and strategic plan to achieve and sustain a position of being free from debt. Now that our debt has been retired, importantly, this budget incorporates and establishes our strategy of remaining debt-free by planning for and utilizing each year's operating surplus funds to pay for long-term facility improvements without debt. In addition to actions that avoid debt, this budget includes a plan to fully fund our known IMRF pension obligations. The board's strategy of prepaying pension obligations resulted in a significant benefit to the district, both in the form of a significant investment return and by way of substantially reducing our employer costs. Over the span of 4 years, our deliberate financial and budget strategy has successfully helped the district to sustain and expand our quality educational services, to retire all of our debt, to prepay pension obligations, to increase our investment returns, to continue our yearly budget efficiencies, and to reduce our reserve funds. Through the board's previous actions and strategy, the district's reserves have been reduced by $52 million, or nearly 1/3 of our total reserves of 4 years ago. We recommend that the board approve the tentative budget this evening and that the district remain on its positive financial course that the board has established. To present you with specific details about the budget this evening, we're pleased to have Lauren Hummel and Barb Peterson. With that, I'll hand it over to Lauren.
Thank you very much. Over the past several months, we have shared information with the board surrounding development of the 2018-2019 tentative budget and are pleased to present the complete tentative budget to the board this evening. The board's strategic plan remains a guiding tool for us as we prioritize expenditures in our annual budget. This year's budget continues to build upon our plan to prioritize student programs, be fully debt-free, and identify budget efficiencies while also maintaining a schedule of fulfilling the capital needs of our buildings. Through our numerous meetings and communications, it remains our priority to provide detailed and transparent information surrounding the financial position of the district. In development of the fiscal year 19 tentative budget, the following parameters have been applied. We have included the strategic priorities that are outlined in the Board of Education strategic plan and prioritized those in our in our tentative budget. We've maintained balanced budgets in each of our operating funds as required by the State Board of Education. We continue to operate debt-free and utilize our reserves to pay for major facility improvement projects and continue to plan to do that as long as financially responsible. We are presenting a budget that operates within the tax cap limitation of the 2017 levy, have implemented budget reductions as committed, and have included our priority to optimize the district's assets. Property taxes remain the district's largest source of revenue, comprising over 85%. The district receives 90% of its total revenue from local sources, which include property taxes, as well as food service sales, corporate personal property replacement taxes, student fees, tuition, and investment earnings. State aid makes up approximately 7% of the district's revenue and is comprised primarily of aid for general student needs, as well as special education and transportation. And finally, federal aid makes up the remaining 3% of the district's revenue and is provided primarily for programs that support our at-risk students. As a district, over 75% of our costs are allocated toward the educational needs and programs of our district. Supporting the instructional program remains our largest priority, and this again is reflected in our tentative budget. As an organization, our largest asset remains that of our people, and therefore our greatest expense is also attributed to the salaries and benefits for these staff members that support the opportunities that we provide to our students. The remaining 25% of our expenditures are comprised of supply and service costs, capital and non-capital equipment, and other categories of expenses which include items such as our utilities, tuition, and lease payments. For the district's operating funds, the tentative budget calls for a slight decrease in total revenue due primarily to a decrease in state aid, as the state made several payments that were due in arrears to us last year and are now caught up on these payments. Regarding our expenditures, we are slightly over our actual budget from last year, and this is primarily due to salary and benefit costs, as well as purchase services for things including grant expenditures, software renewals, and our driver education program, as well as in capital outlay for the replacement of 30 new alternatively fueled school buses. Overall, for the district's operating funds, the tentative budget plans for a budget surplus of approximately $7.9 million. This surplus demonstrates the financial stability of the district and will have a planned utilization for future facility improvement projects that are prioritized in the strategic plan. Transfer of this budget surplus is accounted for in this year's tentative budget. In June, the board took action to approve transfers for this year's capital expenditures, those that were completed summer of 2018. Those transfers have been completed, and already a good portion of them have been expended on the projects that were completed this summer. Included in this year's tentative budget are transfers that will again be planned for presentation to the board prior to the end of the fiscal year for approval. Using this year's planned surplus and existing reserves, transfers of $10 million are planned to be used for next year's capital and life safety projects. The district has already made its final iPad lease payment that was paid in July, and that is our remaining transfer that will take place this year from as the payment was made in the educational fund and will be transferred to the debt service fund. The district is refining its capital plans for the coming summer, but plans to include the second round of stadium turf and track resurfacing, include a set of restroom renovations, and we will also have projects that will be identified on our newly submitted life safety survey, which will be further defined later this year, and as I mentioned, make our final iPad lease payment. With that, the district has become completely debt-free.
There are two special items included in this year's budget. Both are reflected in lines below the operating surplus totals. However, they are both included in the total fund balance numbers. The first is the proceeds from the sale of the district's 62 acres of land. The sale of land is scheduled to close in January 2019, and monies will be receipted into the Operations and Maintenance Fund. They'll go into this fund because that is where we originally bought the asset years ago, and the asset is held on the books of the Operations and Maintenance Fund. Planned utilization of these proceeds will be discussed with the board at meetings later in this school year. And while the proceeds from the sale are included in the budget, no use of the proceeds is included in this budget. For the past 2 years, the district has made special payments to IMRF to pay down its unfunded pension liability yielding annual operating cost savings to the district as well as substantial earnings on our investment returns. The board has approved a resolution earlier this summer to make a special payment of $10.2 million to IMRF prior to December 30th of this year. $8.2 million of that additional payment will be attributed to last year's annual operating surplus, and the remaining $2 million will come from reserves in the IMRF fund. Overall, we have budgeted a deficit of $8.8 million for this year. That is a planned deficit. However, if you'll notice within the red circle there, the numbers that are black are operating surpluses in our operating funds themselves. The surpluses in these operating funds will be transferred out at the end of the school year to cover next year's capital projects, the mandated life safety projects, and make a special payment to IMRF once again. We did commit to the board 5 years of budget reductions, and so far we have met our commitment or exceeded our commitment in each of the preceding years. We are approaching $5 million in overall efficiencies. This year we will continue to receive the benefit of elimination of the retiree health coverage, which was eliminated January 1st of this year. We will also see significant savings through some renegotiation of our telephone and internet contracts, and our recent banking change has eliminated our banking fees and increased our interest income. What we have failed to put on this slide is we will also expect to see about $650,000 in a reduction of our IMRF costs through the board's strategy of paying down that liability, and also for great investment returns in that fund for the last year. This year we've budgeted to spend over $25 million in capital outlay across all funds, of which $21 million is for capital projects. The majority of this work has already been bid, approved by the board, and awarded, and has been actually completed this summer. This is a summary for your review. The recent year-end results and the new budget drive an updated projection model. In our operating funds, revenues are projected to exceed expenses by amounts which will allow us to sustain a level of quality educational and curricular activities, remain debt-free, self-fund all of our capital needs, and make continued special payments to IMRF. 1 year's surplus will fund the next year's capital requirements. Fund balance percentages will remain favorable. However, they do reflect the receipt of the $20 million from the sale of the 62 acres of land. Overall, this is a very favorable picture. This slide is the projection for all funds combined, whereas the last slide was only for the operating funds. Please draw your attention to the yellow line on this page. This upcoming budget year is projected to be our last year of a significant planned deficit. After that, we'll start to smooth out and hover closer to break even, holding our fund balance reserves fairly steady. We'll be able to self-fund $11 to $13 million of capital projects each year. This is another great picture showing us able to remain debt-free for the next 5 years. And finally, tonight we'll wrap up with the review of our legal requirements for passing the budget. We must adopt our budget and file it by September 30th. Prior to that, we must place a tentative budget on display for 30 days, notify the public, hold a public hearing, vote to pass the budget, and then finally file the budget. Certainly thank you for your attention this evening, and we'd like to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? No, guess we have none. Thank you. It was a good presentation. Next, we'll come to our consent agenda. The suggested motion is that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Can we remove item D from the consent agenda, please? And take that as a separate vote?
Sure, yeah, I just was reviewing on both places, sorry. Okay, so the suggested motion, we need an amended motion to
So
remove it.
So moved.
Second.
So right now, we're voting on just the consent agenda with the removal of item D.
Correct.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mrs. Burke,
Aye. Suggested motion to approve item D within the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'm looking for clarification on the new hires relative to the absence of a contract. Do they come in under the prior contract with benefits to be applied retroactive? Does that add additional negotiation requirements on our end to come back and capture this staff? Is there, I guess there'll be a salary correction then at some point?
Yeah, just for the new hires, it's equivalent to the existing people who are under our employ. So they would have the previous contract that continues.
So we
as
wouldn't,
is
so
listed.
then we wouldn't apply the future contract retroactive?
We would apply it retroactively, yes.
But they're, okay, I'm just clarifying. So then any discrepancies between the existing contract and the future approved contract that gets applied retroactively is resolved then at some point?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So with regard to benefits, they're operating under the existing contract benefit package?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Nay.
Mr. Hinshaw,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mrs. Burke,
Aye. Okay. Next, we have our Freedom of Information Act request. This was for our information. Any questions or comments? We also have our parent open house dates. Questions or comments? We have our 2018-2019 tentative budget. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the 2018-2019 tentative budget as presented and direct the superintendent to place it on file for public inspection for a minimum of 30 days. Further, that the notice of a public hearing be held at the Board of Education meeting on September 20th, 2018 be published.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have some. I find it concerning that we've raised our property levy in December by $5 million, and we're projecting another $7 million surplus, and then we've had a significant surplus this year. And looking at the numbers, I still think that we're going to probably have an excessive surplus of those projected. I think we're only calculating about 0.5% less on the recovery rate from the property tax revenue, which adds up to about $1 million. I think that, like Ms. Peterson said, and again, the administration is doing a very good job of presenting clear information, but I'm concerned that we're going to have significant fund balance growth, and that projecting an $11 to $13 million expenditure and a $2 million annual IRMF payment after we've made such a significant contribution and planning on transfers that are going to continue to fund IRMF at $2 million a year on top of what we normally would tax for is a little bit excessive as far as investing in that line item. So for those, I'm not convinced that this is the best use of some of our funds when it comes to these surpluses relative to the levies that we apply in December.
Okay, do you have a question, or you just wanted those statements?
Input
Okay,
for the
I just didn't
discussion.
know.
I didn't know it was restricted to questions.
No, it wasn't. I just wanted to make sure if you had a question, it was answered.
Did you have something in mind that would be a better use of our funds?
Well, when we agreed to the strategic plan in year one, we were supposed to see a 10-year outlay for the capital planning. And I don't think we've seen any projections that go out 10 years. We're in year 3 of the strategic plan. Have you seen a 10-year plan?
I haven't. I'm just curious what the better use would be. I think the way Dr. Cates described it, he's effectively set up a systematic way to continuously fund the capital projects in the least expensive way that I'm aware of. So I'm just not, I'm trying to follow where you think there's a better use of the funds.
Well, first I'm trying to determine, do we need the funds that we're collecting when we levy to the max? And if we don't have a use for those funds, and the philosophy is to continue to capture CPI plus new growth annually, then, you know, this budget kind of sets that precedent. And if we're going to transfer, if we're going to agree with this tentative budget to commit to $2 million annually with the transfer from the surplus into next year's plan, it'd be good to at least see some return, or maybe take a pause and consider that. And again, we can fund $11 to $13 million in capital improvements, but I haven't seen a $11 to $13 million need annually. So
we're not committing to anything other than this budget. We're not committing to a 2-year funding plan.
That is correct. We have a life safety plan that we will be bringing to you in several months. On that, we do not have an estimate at this point, so that is important for us to consider. We do know that the yearly upkeep of our facilities, which we maintain in good quality for our students and an environment that students like to be in, the numbers are in a trend consistent with where we are projecting. So our unknown around the life safety numbers are past trend of data that we've experienced in facility improvements. Our typical annual operating and maintenance numbers, all of those combined to put us very close into the numbers we have projected. In the event that the money is not available, what we don't want to do is prematurely commit to projects that we don't have funding for. That's when districts have to accrue debt. We have staggered our projects to such a degree that we are completing them as we have money available. I did want to address one item about we are levying to the maximum. I do not agree that that's an accurate statement. So the tax cap has certain limitations and restrictions, and we are within that. The district has a long history, complete in your budget book, about levying far beyond CPI. And to the maximum would mean every amount that is available, and we are not proposing that. We are actually proposing levying within the restricted limit established by the typical increase, it's government standard, of the index price of the increase in consumer prices. So our plan is to operate within a limited increase without debt to continue to accomplish the efficiencies and quality that we have delivered.
I was just going to say, I recognize the need for maintaining our buildings, because I think that that's vital in regards to safety for our students and our staff. So I think that that's important, and the planning that we're putting into it is thought out. I do share Mr. Dombrowski's concern about the IMRF. But again, as Mr. Lefevre said, we're just working on the budget right now. So that's something that can change. And I don't know if we do need to continue putting $2 million into it for the next couple of years either. So, but, you know, to focus on this, and I appreciate the overview and the way we could go forward, but maintaining our buildings has always been something that's really important, and, you know, we need to be able to continue doing that.
I'm not quite sure which meeting we discussed it, but we discussed the fact with the IMRF that outside of this year, it's kind of a holding pattern until we get more information and we understand more as we get better reports. And to me, it's, if you're going to project, you have to put something in the projections with the anticipation that we are going to do it, and we can always back out of it. That was my understanding.
It leaves us with choices, and choices are an important asset to have.
Right, and from my perspective, I'm trying to look at how the fund balances are going to stay flat or not increase, because our goal is to get closer to our 33% mark potentially. So if we're projecting spending that we decide later not to use for a certain item, then that just winds up going into the fund balance and growing that reserve. So having part of the budget state that in June, under this budget, we plan to transfer $7 million, that need should be clear. And if part of that $7 million transfer is to make a special payment to IRMF, you know, that's something that we should be clear on.
What, if you're talking about next year, Lauren, if you want to refer to next year.
The June 30 of 2019 transfers of $7 million are to pay for capital improvement projects, which would include track and turf resurfacing, as well as a set of bathroom renovations. And then we have another $3 million that would be transferred from working cash to our life safety fund, and that would be to pay for life safety projects, which will be further defined in the coming few weeks to months here.
So we do know next year's capital projects that are planned. We don't necessarily know all of the life safety projects. And so for the coming year, we do believe that our budget projections are aligned with the known projects and anticipated means to pay for them.
That is correct.
Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klumkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Nay.
Mr. Hinshaw,
Aye.
Mrs. Burke.
Aye. We have board member expenses. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the pre-approval form for future expense reimbursement from Lucia Burke and Stephen Rosenblum to attend the III Conference November 16th through November 18th, 2018, as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hinshaw,
Aye.
Mrs. Klumkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mrs. Burke.
Aye. Any potential topics for future discussion? I would just like to make a comment. When we pull out items from an agenda, which is obviously fine, and I think it's helpful if we're going to vote no, our rationale as to why. You asked some nice questions, but I still don't understand why you, and I'm not looking for the answer here. I just, as we move forward, it would be helpful to understand the rationale of the votes when they're a nay. Thank you. Okay, we come to our committee reports. We have NSSEO and Mrs. Klumkowitz.
Well, we had a brief meeting. School year started for NSSEO August 15th, and Dr. Hackett provided us with some updated information on the continuous improvement plan, and I will get a copy of this to all of our board members. Again, a review of the mission, the vision, and the core values, and looking at student outcomes, student-centered learning, the transition of the students, and collaborative partnerships. And Dr. Hackett is working on what they're calling the NSSEO dashboard. So it would be in their website and their information where it could show a little bit more of the student outcomes, the learning environment, transition services, partnerships, and being able to give some information. And sometimes, you know, people want numbers or percentages, things like that. Just a little bit more information as to what the NSSEO is doing, the special needs for all of our students. So that was it. It was a short meeting. And Dr. Hackett also met at I think it was the Illinois State Board of Education and talked to them about the special ed funding to try to get a little more clarification and to make certain that special needs doesn't get shortchanged, because that's an awfully high expenditure for, our district and all of our districts, and the NSSEO and the services that we have through them. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anything with Ed Red?
No meeting.
The fall kickoff luncheon is going to be October 5th. So that's, anyone's invited to that, but Mr. Dombrowski's the representative, but October 5th is the fall kickoff.
Thank you. Mr. Lefevre, anything additional from Budget and Finance?
No report.
Mr. Young, anything for facilities?
Yeah, sure. This has been a really successful summer for our construction programs. All the parking lot renovations have been completed, as well as the resurfacing of the tennis courts. The football fields at Schaumburg and Frem are ahead of schedule. The track base is now currently being installed over at Schaumburg, and that finished paint will be done as soon as the base is completed. The track base at Frem is completed. However, the turf installation will be started this Saturday. Hopefully, there's a good possibility that Frem will play its home game at Frem instead of Palatine on the first day of September. The Northfield renovation in Conan is well on its way, and if we don't get hit with bad weather like we did at Frem last year, the fields should be ready for the spring sports. Then we have the Media Center at Hoffman, which will be completed by winter, and I'll report on it back then. I would also like to thank the district's maintenance staff. They perform many of the smaller tasks that enhances the image of our district, and I really don't think they get the recognition they deserve. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. This brings us to our announcements for your review. And then there is no need to enter closed session this evening. If there's no objection from anyone on the board, we can move directly to the next item, 17. Board members' discussion of the evening board meeting. Any comments? All right, hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.